The girl's hands were trembling before she even stepped into the marble-floored dining hall. The sound of crystal glasses clinking and cutlery tapping porcelain echoed around her, blending with her own uneven breath. She tried to lift her chin, but the bruise beneath her right eye pulsed with every heartbeat. She had slept behind the old train station the night before, curled around her basket of chocolates like it was a piece of her soul. Now, in this room filled with navy suits, golden chandeliers, and polished manners that masked indifferent hearts, she seemed smaller than ever. When she approached the table of powerful businessmen, one of them let out a sharp laugh, the kind that cut more painfully than words. His perfectly groomed mustache curled as he leaned back in his chair and tapped the polished table with his finger. That moment, the moment his laughter exploded in front of her, felt like a knife driven straight into her courage. It was the kind of humiliation that sears itself into memory, the kind that makes a child wonder if the world sees her as human at all. If you are watching Be Kind Tales and you believe that hope, compassion, and second chances matter, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. The man's eyes sparkled with cruel amusement as he nudged his dinner companion. He motioned toward the basket she held, a basket filled with chocolates she had made by melting unsold scraps donated by an elderly bakery owner. She had spent the early morning shaping them while shivering in the cold, imagining that maybe, just maybe, today someone would buy enough for her to afford a real bed, or maybe a blanket, or maybe even medicine for her brother's chronic cough. That fragile hope was crushed in a blink when the millionaire smirked and said in a loud, mocking tone that she didn't have the ability, not even the basic capacity, to be anything more than a street vendor. His voice was smooth and velvety, the kind that usually persuaded boardrooms, but now it carved shame into her like stone. He added that if she could sell him one chocolate in German, he'd give her 100,000. He knew, everyone at that table knew, that she had never been to school. He was not giving her a chance. He was entertaining himself. Her name was Nayeli. 10 years old, barefoot for most of her life, with braids tied by faded red ribbons she had found in a trash bin. Her father had disappeared years ago when he crossed the border looking for work, and her mother had died after a fever they couldn't afford to treat. Since then, Nayeli had lived on instinct, on scraps, on the rare kindness of strangers, and on the belief, almost childish, almost naive, that working hard would one day pay off. She didn't know why she still believed this. Perhaps because her mother used to tell her, even when coughing blood into her hands, that the world had corners of light waiting for those who kept walking. But here, under shimmering chandeliers and judgmental gazes, that light felt impossibly distant. The millionaire leaned forward as if waiting for her to embarrass herself. Nayeli felt her vision blur with hot tears she refused to let fall. She wished she could speak German. She wished she could speak anything other than her trembling silence. Inside her chest, something fragile began to crack, not just hope, but dignity. Across the table sat another man, dressed in a navy suit that was just as expensive as the millionaire's, but his eyes weren't cold, they were conflicted. His name was Henrik, a visiting consultant from abroad, attending his first meeting with the elitist circle that dominated the city's business world. He had been raised in a family that believed deeply in humility. His mother used to sit with him on the edge of their small balcony, teaching him German lullabies and telling him that language was a bridge, not a weapon. Henrik had lost her 2 years earlier, and since then he had struggled to find meaning in the cutthroat corporate world he now navigated. When he saw Nayeli standing there, bruised cheek, shaking hands, fierce determination buried under humiliation, he felt something shift inside him, something he hadn't felt in years, the powerful urge to intervene. But he hesitated. This was not his home country. These were not his people. And the millionaire beside him was practically a king in this room. To challenge him meant risking everything he had worked for. The tension inside Henrik twisted like a blade as he watched Nayeli attempt to open her mouth, try to form a sound, any sound, before closing it again in defeat. The millionaire roared with laughter. Around them, the restaurant's wealthy patrons pretended not to notice, though several eyes flicked toward the scene with discomfort. Sunlight drifted through the large windows, falling across the white tablecloth like a spotlight on an unspoken cruelty. Nayeli felt the room spinning slightly. The smell of roasted coffee beans and pastries suddenly reminded her how long it had been since she last ate. She clutched the basket tighter, not because the chocolates mattered, they were cheap, uneven, and slightly melted around the edges, but because they represented everything she had left. Her mind drifted to her little brother, Matteo, who was waiting in the abandoned train station, wrapped in her mother's old shawl. She had promised him she would come back with dinner. He always smiled with a gap in his teeth, always believed in her, always trusted her. She whispered to herself now, begging silently that she wouldn't fail him today. Henrik finally exhaled, slow and heavy. He tapped a finger on the table, trying to gather courage. Memories of his mother's soft voice came back. When you see someone smaller than you, hurting, help them. Otherwise, you become smaller than them. His pulse raced. He turned toward the millionaire and said nothing aloud, but inside, he made a choice. Nayeli sniffed once, wiped her cheek with the back of her sleeve, and prepared to walk away. She had learned long ago that surviving meant swallowing humiliation quietly. But before she could take a step, Henrik stood up abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping sharply against the tile. The sound cut through the entire hall. Everyone looked. Nayeli froze. Henrik gently knelt down in front of her, lowering himself until his eyes were level with hers. In that moment, he wasn't a businessman or a consultant. He was simply a human being facing a child who had been hurt too many times. He reached into his pocket and took out his wallet. The millionaire watched with raised eyebrows, disdain painted across his face, but Henrik no longer cared. He took one chocolate from her basket. Then he looked at her and spoke softly in German, not to impress the millionaire, but to honor his late mother's lessons. He translated the words in his mind as he said them, letting each syllable land with quiet sincerity. Her eyes widened, not because she understood the language, but because she saw the kindness in his gaze. His words weren't a performance. They were a bridge. He placed a stack of bills into her small hand. More money than she had ever held. Enough to change everything. A hush fell over the room. The millionaire's smirk faltered. Nayeli's breath caught as tears finally spilled over, not from humiliation this time, but from overwhelming relief. She clutched the money to her chest as if afraid it would vanish. She felt a warmth blooming inside her, fragile but real. The corners of the world her mother once spoke of, those corners of light, finally began to glow. If this story is touching your heart so far, Be Kind Tales asks you again to support the channel with a like and share. Stories like these grow when compassion spreads. Henrik gently guided her toward the exit, ensuring she wasn't overwhelmed by the gawking patrons. When they stepped outside, daylight washed over them, warm, clean, almost gentle. For the first time in months, Nayeli felt safe. She whispered a thank you in a shaky voice. Her future was still uncertain, but something profound had changed. The world had proven that kindness existed, that hope wasn't just a childish dream. She ran back toward the train station, clutching the basket and money close, eager to show Matteo that miracles were real. Henrik watched her go, feeling an unexpected sense of peace settle inside him, the kind he hadn't felt since losing his mother. He realized this single moment, this choice to act, had given him back a part of himself he thought was gone forever. Before the final emotional closing moment, please ask viewers to comment on what part of the story touched them the most. Nayeli reached the train station, sunlight streaking through the cracked roof like blessings. Matteo sat up immediately when he saw her, eyes wide, and she held up the money with trembling joy. He jumped into her arms, laughing, and for a moment their world felt full again. As she held her brother close, Nayeli promised herself she would use this chance to build something better, something brighter. The millionaire's mockery had been meant to break her, but instead, it had led her to a stranger whose compassion reshaped her entire path. And as she hugged Matteo beneath the golden light, she realized her mother had been right